Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove. I'm here today with another Omnibus review, and today I'm going to be taking a look at one that is very exciting for me and really a very special one, to be honest. It's the newly released Amazing Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 5. Now, yeah, hugely exciting for me and any other Spider-Man fans and probably a lot of other just Omnibus collectors in general, because this is not only great material in here, classic stuff to have in an omnibus as a Spider-Man fan, but also I believe the very first volume 5 of an omnibus that we've had for any series from Marvel that's not Conan, because, well, Conan is probably up to about volume 16 by now, but yeah, for everything else, getting to volume 5 has been a milestone that's been a long way off for a long time. So finally here we've got Amazing Spider-Man, of all things, my favourite series of all time, collected in a fifth volume. Fantastic stuff, amazing stuff, I should say. Yeah, so let's take a look. I'm going to showcase the book today and kind of just give everybody a look at it, discuss some of the material in here, just generally showcase it, So firstly, the cover here on the dust jacket, this is the direct market variant, the cover to issue 151. That is by Gil Kane. Really cool image, really nice cover. There is, another variant cover as well, which is a piece of original artwork. I'll show that off. It's collected in the back of the book. But for me personally, I had to go for the direct market because I just love it. Really nice cover, and I've gone for the direct market cover for all the other volumes of this series as well. So kind of felt like I had to keep it going. The spine, yeah, I suppose I should mention that a little bit. It's the new spine design from Marvel. It's the small text for both the title and the creator names down here. You get a little image as well. I've already spoken about that in my Fantastic Four Omnibus Volume 2 review, so I won't go into that again, really. But, the spine, it is what it is. I'd rather it stayed with the old design, but there you go. It doesn't really matter too much to me anyway. The content is the main thing, and speaking of the content, take a look on the back. You get your cover gallery of all the stuff in here. And there's quite a lot in here. It's quite a big chunk of material, talking about Amazing Spider-Man issues 143 to 180, annuals 10, 11, and an issue crossed over to Nova, number 12. Really exciting stuff, guys, honestly. Now, the book itself, pretty standard kind of typical silver/bronze age style, plain design, really nothing too exciting. The spine is, they get that same style on the spine. It is a different spine image, like down here, this thing. That's the same little image you would get on the standard variant. On the dust jacket, you can see it's something else. So maybe worth pointing that out. Not a huge deal either way, but if you get the direct market cover, you get both of those images. And then nice Spidey mask logo on the back. So what I will do with this book is go into a few spoilers. Now, obviously this is old material, so it kind of almost feels silly a little bit sometimes talking about mentioning spoilers, but at the end of the day, not everybody's read this stuff, and just because a comic is old doesn't mean everybody's read it, and that would be a mistake to assume that. So I will go over a few plot points, not everything, because there's a huge chunk of issues in here, and yeah, I'm not going to summarize it all. But yeah, so I will say some things. So if you don't want to know anything about the material in here, really, then you might want to come back and watch this another time. But otherwise, if you're not too bothered or you've read it before, then feel free to stick around. So you get your table of contents here. So you go in from, as we said before, 143 up to 180. So in here you're getting about 3 years of material. So from 1975 to 1978. And it is so awesome to think that now, in omnibus format, we have an unbroken run of Spider-Man material from Amazing Fantasy 15 in 1962 all the way up to Amazing Spider-Man 180 in 1978. It's 16 years of Spider-Man material collected in omnibus format. Fantastic stuff, honestly. It's so exciting for me. Then you get this really nice introduction by Jerry Conway, which he wrote a number of years ago for a Marvel Masterworks that collected the first few issues in here. He talks about the aftermath of the death of Gwen Stacy and his final issues on the book, because I should probably mention actually, these are the last few issues of Jerry Conway as writer. And after that, move on to the run by Len Wein. And it's kind of crazy to think that by the time Len Wein took over the book with issue 151, he was only the third regular writer of Amazing Spider-Man. It had been Stan Lee for the first 100-ish issues, then Jerry Conway, and then Len Wein. So you get Jerry Conway's final few issues in here, then most of Len Wein's run. I think just the final few issues of his run that aren't collected in here. But yeah, so off you go then, really, with more classic Bronze Age Spider-Man, moving further and further into the Bronze Age. You get sort of the further developments of Peter Parker and Mary Jane's relationship, which perfect page to kind of turn onto here is showcase that as they start to get closer to each other. And then you get your first kind of major story arc in here, probably the one big one that this omnibus is going to be known for in terms of what it collects, and that's the original Clone Saga story, not to be confused with the massive crossover saga thing that ran through the 90s. So what goes on in here? So it's all to do with the villain, the Jackal. The Jackal had turned up about 20 or so issues earlier, and for quite a while he'd been kind of hounding Spider-Man, sort of plotting schemes against him, teaming up with other villains against him, and you didn't know who the Jackal was, and you still don't at this point. But it's clear he's got it out for Spider-Man, you just don't know why or who he is. It's kind of very reminiscent of the very earliest issues of featuring Green Goblin, before he was revealed to be Norman Osborn. He was kind of showing up and his secret identity was kind of hinted at, teased a little bit. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that. But anyway, what happens in here is the big dramatic moment, is the apparent return of Gwen Stacy, who had been dramatically, shockingly killed off back in issue 121, showing up here, seemingly alive and well in Peter Parker's apartment. And yeah, so that's kind of a big, shocking moment, you know? And he's kind of trying to figure out what is going on. He doesn't believe it. He's sure it's some villain scheme against him to try and manipulate him, mess with him. So he kind of lashes out at her, doesn't believe she's real. She is getting upset. She doesn't know why he's angry. She doesn't seem to know anything's amiss here with the situation. So it's very odd. It's very weird. And basically, what it turns out to be is that she's a clone. So she's a Gwen Stacy clone who was created by the Jackal because it turns out that the Jackal was obsessed with Gwen Stacy, basically. And here in issue 148, quite a cool issue where it all starts off at the top of the same bridge that Gwen Stacy was thrown off, and the Jackal here teaming up with Tarantula, throwing Spider-Man off as some kind of poetic justice in his mind, in the Jackal's mind. So the Jackal is revealed in the very next issue, issue 149, Jerry Conway's final issue, and the conclusion of the, by this point, fairly long-running Jackal saga. So the Jackal is Professor Warren. Okay, now Professor Warren had been Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy's biology professor at the university they attend, Empire State University. A very unassuming side character who had made not many appearances and no significant appearances prior to this revelation that this is who he is. So I would imagine that at the time, this is probably one of the very last people, if not the last person, the last character that fans would have imagined the Jackal to turn out to be. And it turns out, it's revealed in this story that Professor Warren had a infatuation with Gwen Stacy, and when she died, he was distraught, and it sent him into a kind of madness. He became the Jackal. He cloned her. He cloned Peter Parker. So there's a Peter Parker clone in here. And it's honestly, it's weird. You know, this Spider-Man and clones they don't go together very well. You know, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like a jinx when you're talking about Spider-Man and you mention clones. It's generally not a good thing. This story is not too bad. It's not the kind of extreme, over-the-top levels of the Clone Saga and how long and drawn out that was. It's a fairly short story in the end in terms of the actual clone aspect of it. But even so, it's kind of weird. I like it. You know, it's pretty nice in terms of this final goodbye here, where Peter kind of says goodbye to the Gwen Stacy clone. She acknowledges at this point that she's not the original Gwen Stacy, and she kind of goes off on her way. Oh yeah, and then there's this really nice final scene as well that mirrors the final scene of issue 122, 121, 122, where Mary Jane had decided to stay with Peter, and she didn't. She closed the door and stayed with him in that final scene. And in this scene, Peter does the same to stay with her. Really nice moment. I think it's a good end point for Jerry Conway. I think he talks about this in his introduction. He made a conscious decision to try and end his run with some kind of, you know, distinctive ending, and I think he did that. And it's a pretty good story overall. It's just a bit weird. The whole Professor Warren thing is a little bit out of the blue, really, when it happens. But, you know, it's not bad. It's just a bit odd. But I really like this whole era. You know, Bronze Age Spider-Man is fantastic. Silver and Bronze Age Spider-Man as a whole. I really enjoy it. So then you get issue 150, which was kind of a fill-in issue in a way, really. Before Len Wein took over with issue 151, and there's that cover from the direct market variant. And all through here, pretty much, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 fill-in issues, the artwork is by the brilliant Ross Andru, who did such a great job on this series for a number of years during the 70s that he was drawing Spider-Man. One of those artists who doesn't often tend to get mentioned specifically, not rarely kind of name dropped when it comes to talking about maybe the greatest artists, but he really does deserve a special mention because his artwork on here, on this series, was always really nice, really good. Still in that kind of, very much that kind of house style, I suppose you could say, that was kind of established by John Romita when he first penciled the book. He kind of set the visual style for Spider-Man that everybody would kind of follow all the way up until when Todd McFarlane took over, basically many years later. But Ross Andru very much putting his own style onto it, you know, like it's that general kind of Romita style, but you can absolutely tell the quality that Andrew added to it himself. And all through here, like I say, it's really good artwork. I think that Silver and Bronze Age Spider-Man never had any bad artwork. And I'm definitely looking forward to reading through this material again. I gotta say, you know, I've not read all of this before. I think I've read most of the issues in here. Read them digitally myself. So it'll be nice to read them in oversized format, having not read them for a while. You know, you're getting a lot of familiar villains throughout here. You're getting, you know, Doc Ock, Hammerhead's coming back. Cool stuff. And then less interesting classic villains like the Human Fly. And the Spider-Mobile makes a return. Spider-Mobile had first appeared back in, I want to say the issue 120 something, back in volume 4 anyway of the Omnibus. And here it comes back, controlled by somebody else. trying to get Spidey, sort of classic killer car kind of thing. It turned out to be the Tinkerer who's controlling it. The Tinkerer who barely appeared. I think this was the first time he turned up, actually, all the way since issue 2 of Amazing Spider-Man. I think this is only the second time he'd appeared. I actually get this guest appearance here for a couple of issues with Nightcrawler. And Nightcrawler himself was only a very new character at this point. He'd only just appeared about a year or so earlier, back in Giant Size X-Men #1 with the Uncanny Team. So yeah, he was new at this point. He's in a couple of issues. I think it's 161, 162. The Kingpin. You know, the Kingpin, I think so often now, most commonly associated as a Daredevil villain, but very much started out as a Spider-Man villain. And I think as well, you got to point out with the Bronze Age, you know, it hadn't quite, even though there were more serious storytelling elements during this kind of era of comics in general than there had been back in the the 60s. There is still definitely that remnant of Silver Age silliness that crossed over into comics of this time, where you get, for example, villains such as the Dinosaur Man. You know, now that's, for me, that's a cool thing because I enjoy those kinds of wacky Silver Age stories, so it doesn't bother me that that kind of thing lingers onwards, you know, all through this material. But it's worth pointing out, you know, just in general, that the transition from Silver to Bronze Age, whilst overall involving a more of a shift towards more serious storytelling, by no means meant that all the elements of the Silver Age were quickly abandoned. The Lizard. I'm a big fan of the Lizard. One of my favourite Spider-Man villains, I think. And then this is one of my least favourite villains that they just couldn't leave behind. You know, it just shows up so often, you know, periodically through the Silver Age and the Bronze Age. The Spider Slayer. Just different versions of this machine that always ends up being controlled by J. Jonah Jameson and is always designed to hunt down Spider-Man and always fails, and yet it gets repeated. You know, it's one of the... It's almost like you can't really call it a villain because it's just a robot, a machine that just keeps getting made in different versions, supposedly upgraded every time. But it's a repeating storyline that is one of the weaker ones that you see throughout this whole era of Spider-Man, Silver and Bronze Age eras. But it kept happening, they kept doing it, so somebody must have liked it. And it's not terrible by any means, you know. It's just, for me, when you get to one of those issues, it's just one of those that you kind of you sort of go, here we go again. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, issue 169, this is where it's quite an interesting one. JJ thinks that he's managed to find out that Spider-Man is Peter Parker, and this is actually a throwback to the Clone Saga storyline. And it's all because of the fact that there were two Peter Parkers, two Spider-Men. But, you know, it gets resolved. All throughout here as well, You know, as always, as you tend to get in these eras of Omnibus, you get in the original letter pages, which always provide a nice bit of insight into what readers of the time were thinking about the book. Here's that crossover with Nova. Possibly wrong on this, so I may well be, but I think this is actually the only issue of Nova from this era to be so far collected in an oversized volume like this. I think, anyway. May be wrong on that. Not a huge Nova fan, so I'm possibly getting mistaken there. One of the annuals here. Trying to recognise that cover then. Couldn't quite remember what it was. Yeah, the Spider Squad. What can you even say? You know, it's more of that kind of Silver Age wackiness. It's so much fun though. That's the thing, you know. I don't know. It's just so much fun to read through Spider-Man from this time. The return of the Molten Man, who had previously melted away, so back in issue, I don't know, 130 something, I think, he'd seemingly melted away. But apparently not. Really enjoying this Ross Andru work, even just flipping through the book pretty quickly now. I'm just looking at it, admiring it. And then at the end, these final few issues collected in the book feature the return of the Green Goblin. Now, at this point, the Green Goblin is not Norman Osborn because he had died immediately after Gwen Stacy had died, killed by his own glider. Classic. So at this point, this is Harry Osborn, who has taken the Goblin mantle. And it's about a 5-issue story arc at the end here, with him returning to terrorize Spider-Man, to terrorize Peter specifically. And this is where the book leaves off. So this final issue that concludes this arc is issue 180, the final issue in the book. And a nice splash page to finish it all off on. So that's the issues, and in the back you've got the the bonus stuff. Quite a few different covers, bits of artwork. It's quite a nice pin-up there by John Romita. Another John Romita image there. It's quite a cool comedic take on that scene where Peter discovers the clone Gwen in his apartment by Ross Andru. Almost wish he'd done that, just for how weird it would have been. Oh yeah, really cool. Original pencils for that 151 cover by Gil Kane. Always nice to see the original pencils. And then you always tend to get a few of these as well. These reprint covers of Marvel Tales, different reprints from over the years. Like a final afterword here by Jerry Conway. And then the standard variant for the book. So that's the variant edition that you can get from everywhere, you know, not just the direct market, but anywhere, but basically that sells books. So that's a bit of original artwork, specifically for this omnibus by Paco Medina. And it's quite nice, you know, it was a decent cover, but for me I had to go for the classic Gil Kane cover. So yeah, you know, really nice addition to the collection. Really great to get a volume 5 in general of an omnibus. And Amazing Spider-Man in particular. If I had been able to pick one volume 5 before this was announced to get, it would have been this. So a book I'm really happy to have, a book I'm happy to look forward to reading through again. And yeah, honestly, it's just a huge deal to get this book and add it to the collection. Hopefully, you know, looking ahead, maybe getting a little bit ahead of myself since this has literally just arrived, but it'd be great to get a volume 6 to bridge that gap between this and the Roger Stern omnibus, to go from issues, what would that be, 181 to 223, 24, something like that, off the top of my head. But yeah, if you know, that would be great. Absolutely unbelievable if that could happen. But yeah, you know, guys, thanks as always for watching this and sticking with me through this, listening to me speak at length about Spider-Man and this omnibus. Always appreciate the time it takes for you to watch this, so appreciate the support. But yeah, hopefully, let me know. You know, well, let me know if this is a book you're going to be getting. If Spider-Man is your thing, you know, it's, yeah, I'm just not quite over it. I'm just babbling because I'm so excited and happy to have a volume 5 of Amazing Spider-Man. So I'll shut up now. But yeah, thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll be back again soon with another video.